He didn't know that this night would be anything but ordinary. Jayden walked quickly. The street ahead was deserted, with only a few cars passing by, leaving long streaks of red tail lights behind them. In the distance, a siren wailed, but in this area, that was common. He didn't pay any attention to the sound. He was just a few blocks away from home. He turned down an alley. It was a shorter route. The narrow road between old brick buildings led to the busy avenue, where bright lights could already be seen. Music played in his headphones, slightly muffling the surrounding sounds. It was because of the music that he didn't hear the screech of brakes behind him. "Hey, you, stop." The voice was loud and authoritative. Jayden turned around and saw flashing blue lights. A police car stopped at the edge of the road, and two officers stepped out. One had his hand on his holster, and the other was walking quickly toward him. Jayden's heart pounded in his chest. What? Why? He raised his hands, showing that he had nothing. "What's going on, officer?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Face the wall, hands behind your head," one of them commanded briefly. "Wait, but I didn't do anything." Panic rang in his voice. The officer didn't repeat himself. He simply stepped closer and roughly turned Jayden, pushing him chest first against the brick wall. "Hey, be careful." A sharp jerk, and his arms were already twisted behind his back. Panic mounted. "Officer, please, I'm just going home." He felt his palms getting sweaty. "You fit the description," came the voice from behind him. "What description?" Instead of answering, Jayden felt the cold metal click onto his wrists. "Don't resist." That was the last thing he heard before feeling a harsh shove forward. The cold cuffs bit into his wrists, leaving thin red marks on his skin. Jayden stood, pressing his forehead against the rough brick, trying to control his breathing. Thoughts raced chaotically through his mind. Why? Why are they detaining me? One of the officers performed a rough search, slapping at his pockets. They pulled out his phone, ripped the headphones from his ears, and threw them onto the hood of the police car. "What did I do?" Jayden's voice cracked. There was no answer, only a silent shove in the back. "I didn't do anything." "Yeah, that's what they all say." The officer standing nearby shook his head with lazy disbelief, as though all this was just part of a rehearsed ritual. "Who do you work for?" "What? Where are your drugs?" "What drugs?" Jayden flinched. The second officer opened the trunk of the police car and slowly looked around. Then he came back, and without saying a word, shoved Jayden so hard that he nearly lost his balance. "Officer, please, I need to make a call." "You'll call when you get to the station." "But I didn't do anything. You haven't even explained why I'm being detained." The first officer looked at him over his sunglasses and leaned in closer. "You talk too much." The next thing happened so quickly that Jayden didn't even have time to process it. A sharp jerk. A sudden pain in his stomach. He doubled over, the air knocked out of his lungs with a groan. "I told you don't resist." The dark alley walls seemed to close in on him. In the distance, he could hear the honking of cars, voices, laughter. People were living their ordinary lives, unaware that injustice was unfolding just a few feet away. Jayden's head spun. He was shoved into the car, and the door slammed shut with a dull thud. Outside the window, the blue and red lights flashed. The key to his house remained in his pocket, and he might never see it again that night. The police car sped through the night, cutting through the darkness with the bright flashes of its emergency lights. Jayden sat on the hard plastic seat, his wrists burning from the cuffs, and helpless rage surged in his chest. He tried to think of something to calm him down: his mom, his home, warm evenings with his friends, but all he felt was a sticky fear. The SUV screeched to a halt in front of a gray building with dim lights at the entrance. The bars on the windows made the station look more like a prison. The door swung open with a clank, and an officer dragged him out. "Come on, move it," he barked, shoving Jayden forward. The clanging door shut behind him. He was in a sterile corridor, its walls marked with the fingerprints and scuffed shoes of countless others. The smell of sweat, cheap cleaning products, and tobacco mixed into an unpleasant blend. "Name?" the indifferent officer at the desk asked. "Jayden Carter." "Age?" 22. The officer lazily typed the information into the system, not even bothering to look at him. "Do you have someone to call?" he asked, handing him an old landline phone. "Mom." Jayden swallowed hard, feeling his throat dry up. The officer glanced at him with a slight smirk, as if he already knew how this call would end. With trembling fingers, he dialed the number. "Hello, Mom. It's me. Jayden? Oh my God, where are you? His mother's voice trembled with panic. "I've been detained." A sharp jolt to his shoulder interrupted him. "Time's up." The officer yanked the phone away and hung it up. "Please, just a minute." "Enough," the officer muttered irritably. "Take him to the cell." They led him through the long corridor, the harsh light of the lamps making everything seem unreal. At the end of the hall was a massive iron bolt. "Welcome, kid." The officer smirked and opened the cell. Jayden took a step inside, and the door slammed shut behind him. A cramped space, concrete floor, bunks with thin mattresses, the smell of dampness. In the far corner, a man in a torn t-shirt stared at him from under his hood. "New guy, huh?" he rasped. Jayden didn't respond. He just sat in the corner, pressing his back against the cold wall, and closed his eyes. The night promised to be long. There were no clocks in the cell, but Jayden knew morning was coming. Beyond the concrete walls, the world continued on with its usual pace, people rushing to work, the sun slowly rising over the city, cars honking in traffic. But here, in the cell, time seemed to stand still. The cold seeped through him. He couldn't sleep, though exhaustion weighed him down like heavy chains. His cellmate muttered to himself, swaying back and forth. Somewhere in the distant hallway, a dull thud echoed. Someone probably got their dose from the guards. "Carter!" a guard shouted, banging his baton against the iron bars. Jayden flinched and raised his head. "Get up, kid. Court in 2 hours." They led him out of the cell and through the long corridor. His legs shook from fatigue, but he tried to stand tall. "Don't show weakness," he told himself. The door opened into a small room. In the corner stood an attorney, an elderly man with gray temples and a tired look in his eyes. "Jayden, right?" he asked, flipping through papers. "I'm Richard Hall, your public defender. We don't know each other, but they assigned me your case." Jayden nodded silently. "So, the charges against you: resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and assaulting an officer." "What?" Jayden exploded. "I didn't touch anyone. It was them." "Calm down." Hall raised his hand. "I understand, but the judge doesn't care about your words if we don't have evidence. There's footage. The video from my phone." The lawyer shook his head tiredly. "The video might disappear, and the cameras on that street, unfortunately, were broken." Jayden felt rage boil up inside him. "This isn't fair. It's the system." Hall looked at him sympathetically. "Listen, your best chance is to not make things worse. I'll try to get you a suspended sentence or community service. But if you argue with the judge, you could get real time." "I didn't do anything." "I know." The lawyer glanced at the clock. "But that's not what matters right now." With a sinking feeling, Jayden stepped back, following the guard. The courtroom awaited. Another stage in a game that wasn't his choice to play. Jayden walked into the courtroom with his head low. The bright, harsh lights overhead felt almost blinding, and the cold air seemed to press down on him from all sides. His heart raced in his chest, and his mind kept replaying the events from the night before. He tried to focus, but the chaos in his head wouldn't settle. His public defender, Richard Hall, stood beside him, a few steps ahead, scanning the room as if trying to prepare for what was coming. Jayden wanted to speak, to scream out, to tell everyone what had happened, but he couldn't find his voice. His throat felt tight, constricted. The judge entered, a stern woman with silver-rimmed glasses, and the courtroom fell silent. She nodded at the officers, who stood like statues in their uniforms, and then glanced at the files in front of her. The room was cold and silent, except for the occasional rustle of paper. "State your name and charges," the judge's voice cut through the air like a blade. Richard Hall cleared his throat and stood, nodding slightly to Jayden. "Your Honor, my client, Jayden Carter, is facing charges of resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and assaulting an officer. However, he maintains his innocence." Jayden felt his stomach twist. The words felt foreign, like they didn't belong to him. He didn't know how to explain everything that had happened. He just wanted someone to listen, to believe him. The prosecutor stood, a tall man with a sharp suit and a colder smile. He addressed the judge without hesitation. "Your Honor, we have witnessed testimony and reports from the officers involved. It's clear that Mr. Carter did not comply with instructions and physically resisted the arrest. There is evidence to suggest that his actions were aggressive, and the officers acted in accordance with procedure. Jayden's head buzzed. He couldn't listen to this anymore. It wasn't true. It wasn't him. He wanted to shout out, but he was frozen in place, staring at the desk in front of him. Richard Hall turned to him quietly. "I know this is difficult, but we need to keep calm. We'll go over everything later. You need to stay quiet now." Jayden nodded slowly, trying to keep himself together. "We also have a video from the body camera of one of the officers," the prosecutor continued, his voice dripping with certainty. "It shows the defendant actively resisting and even attempting to strike one of the officers during the encounter." The video. Jayden's mind flashed to the footage on his phone, the one he'd tried so desperately to show the officers last night, but now, they had their footage. The truth was being twisted, and he couldn't stop it. The judge nodded curtly. "We'll watch the footage," she ordered. The screen flickered on, and the room fell into an eerie silence. The footage began, showing the dark alley and the flashing lights. Jayden saw himself on screen, walking alone, when suddenly the two officers appeared, shouting at him to stop. The video showed him turning around, confusion on his face, and then the officer grabbing his arm, pushing him against the wall. The footage continued, showing Jayden struggling, his arms flailing as they attempted to cuff him. It seemed to capture everything they said about him: aggressive, resisting arrest, attempting to strike. His heart pounded as he watched himself on the screen, but something about it felt wrong. It didn't look the way he remembered it. He didn't resist. He didn't try to fight back. He looked over at Richard, who was watching the footage intently, his brow furrowed. "Is that it?" Jayden whispered. "It's just the beginning," Richard replied quietly. "Let's see what else they've got." The prosecutor pressed a button, and the video switched to another angle, showing a different part of the alley. It was another body camera from one of the officers. Jayden watched in horror as the footage clearly showed him being pushed toward the police car, his hands cuffed behind him. The sound was muffled, but there were voices. Jayden heard one of the officers say something about him fitting the description of a suspect involved in a nearby robbery. The other officer seemed to mutter something about troublemakers before they shoved him into the back of the car. "This is all wrong," Jayden whispered to himself. But no one heard. The judge watched the video without a hint of emotion. Her eyes flicked to the prosecutor, then back to Jayden. Her gaze was cold, assessing. "Mr. Carter, you have the right to speak in your defense. Please take the stand if you wish." Jayden stood, his legs feeling like jelly, but he made himself walk toward the stand. The eyes of the room were on him now. His heart thudded painfully in his chest as he stepped up and sat. "I didn't do anything," Jayden said, his voice cracking but strong enough to be heard. "I swear, I didn't resist. I was just walking home. They didn't even tell me why they stopped me. I didn't know what was happening. He paused, his throat tight. "They just took me." The prosecutor's voice cut through the silence. "Your Honor, the defendant is simply fabricating his story. The video shows him resisting arrest and becoming aggressive with the officers. It's clear from the footage that he posed a threat." Jayden's hands tightened into fists. This wasn't right. None of this was. "But the video is wrong," Jayden exclaimed, his voice growing louder. "You don't see what happened before that. You don't know what they said to me, what they did." The judge raised her hand. "Mr. Carter, calm down." He took a shaky breath, but he couldn't hold back the rush of frustration. This wasn't justice. This wasn't fair. He was being railroaded, treated like a criminal, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. The judge looked at him, her expression unreadable. "We'll recess for now." She stood up. "I'll deliberate and return with a decision shortly." The room erupted in hushed conversations, but Jayden didn't hear any of it. His mind was racing, his pulse quickening. This wasn't over. He couldn't let it end like this. He couldn't let them take his future from him. As the officers led him back to the holding room, Jayden's eyes locked on the door, where the outside world seemed so far away. But he wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. He would find a way to fight back. He had to.